This is Coder Radio, episode 266 for July 20th, 2017. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Coder Radio. This episode is a little bit special, but it's, of course, always your weekly talk show that tries to take a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and, of course, related technologies. This episode is brought to you by our two wonderful sponsors, DigitalOcean and Scale Your Code. My name is Wes, and being ever so gracious and letting me join him this week is, of course, our amazing host, Mr. Michael Dominic. Hello, Mike.
Listen, I'm not going to respond to your email, Wes, but I love it.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot.
Thank you.
How are you doing today? Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for showing up, because I definitely would have forgot.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're a busy man. That can be forgiven, I think.
I'm pretty sure that I'm the Dean Martin of podcasters at this point. We all know that I'm a little in the bag, but it's okay.
Yeah, well, when I get that place, and maybe it's because I'm here in the Pacific Northwest, I kind of want a coffee, right? I mean, I've always wanted coffee. I should be drinking coffee right now, but I'm not. And sometimes it's just too hard. I have to get up. I have to go try to order coffee. There's probably a line because I live in the city. It's terrible.
Microsoft. Yeah, terrible.
Mm-hmm. Maybe Starbucks should be able to do something about that. Tell us more.
Well, if they had an API that was open, that would be far more convenient, because then someone could write a bot for you that from our JB Slack channels would order you a cup of coffee.
Oh, see, now that would be perfect. It'd be ready right when I get into town.
Just have a guy show up with coffee. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
But of course, Starbucks has a proprietary API. And for those of you who haven't been paying attention for the last week, there's a great blog post of somebody who actually reversed engineered the Starbucks API in the iOS and Android app. It's kind of amazing, actually, because when you look at the JSON outputs, if you're a mobile developer or even just a web developer who uses JSON API points, you realize this huge corporation's just like me. This is exactly how I would structure this, right?
Totally. Oh, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So have you tried it out?
That would be a violation of their terms of service.
Yes, it would. See, that was a trick question right there.
Yeah, see, me and my buddy Donald Jr. are very careful about how we answer questions these days. I want you to know that.
You have to be.
People always trying to jam me up, cause problems. No, but to be honest with you, it is surprising to me. I don't know if you know this, Wes. I just relocated to Florida.
Yeah, I've been hearing about that. You've done that once before, right?
That was more of a vacation.
Okay, like an extended vacation.
Yeah,
just flirting with the idea.
It was like sort of like an office romance after hours when the cleaners left the office kind of thing. Yeah, we didn't talk about it.
Right. Well, no, I mean, in polite company, that's not something you can really bring up. But you're back. So how do you like it?
I love it. It's great. I'm actually, funny enough, I'm actually opening an office down here in Plant City. And I'm trying to figure out coffee service. Believe it or not, I swear to God I didn't set this up on purpose for the office in Plant City.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, you got to keep people productive. They need to have their coffee.
It would be super helpful? Like Slack, hey, order us, 5 pounds of. I have to be honest, I don't buy Starbucks coffee, so I have no idea what the names of their roasts are.
No, I don't either.
Let's just say medium coffee, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that's one of those things, right, where people will do it if it's dead simple, but any more complexity than that, and it's just not going to happen unless it's someone's job to do it.
Right, and my whole business runs on Slack, so we're at the point where if it doesn't exist in a Slack bot, it simply doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, right.
Wow.
It's like the Jedi Order right before they all got killed, which, maybe not the best policy.
No, maybe not. But, I mean, if it works for you.
Yeah, there's this one kid, Anakin, though. I'm a little worried, but it's gonna be fine. Don't worry.
Do you pay for Slack, or are you on a free tier?
Oh no, we're quite a ways beyond the free.
Yeah,
tier.
that's what I would assume.
Yeah. I think it's like 150 a month or something. It's Slack is an interesting business. I mean, this wasn't on the show notes, but they have one of the most addictive products, because we had Tip Chat and that was included.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought I'd heard you talk about that before.
Right, and we pay for Atlassian, so we're actually already paying for HipChat as a part of that. But the team just loves Slack, and got to keep the people happy, right?
You sure do. And I mean, if they're going to take to it and they're going to use it and actually use all the features, then yeah, maybe it's worth the cost. I know like a lot of people are in that position as well now that Office 365 has that Teams feature.
Right.
So, but I've not also seen any kind of like large movement to use that, even if you've already done it.
Yeah.
Just Slack really, once it's got its hooks in, it's there to stay.
It reminds me of heroin in a lot of ways. Once you start, it pretty much is going to rule your life.
Yeah. Well, at this point, it's been integrated with so many services. It's just that, that kind of popularity factor where it's just like, well, I know it'll work with Slack.
And enterprising people are writing bots that manage your business and your back office activities with Slack.
That's a pretty nice value proposition to kind of, to ignore. Hard to do.
I think it is too.
Awesome. So it looks like this guy also posts up like it's a JavaScript API here for ordering from Starbucks. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, so I haven't tested it in about a week. I'm wondering if Starbucks didn't go ahead and lock that down a bit more.
Yeah, it's funny. What is it? It's like it was like openapi.starbucks.com, but it does not actually open. You're not supposed to use it.
You have to actually spoof your user agent to make it look like you're on a mobile device. Like, there's all this crazy stuff to do.
All those little signs where you're like, yeah, maybe this isn't the request that they'd like to be seen. Yeah. But it is frustrating, especially when you're like, here's like a well-formed API that I could use that you're not trying to take advantage of anything. It's not that I want free coffee. I mean, I do, but I'm not trying to get it. I just want the coffee.
Well, I sort of don't get it, right? So like if you have a bot that integrates with, like, we're talking about Slack, so let's say Slack, and you could have a Starbucks feature, why wouldn't Starbucks let you order coffee from that? It seems crazy to me. Like if my mission in life was to sell you more coffee.
Right, yeah, you should make it as easy as possible.
I would be like, you could literally text pound coffee and I will get you a coffee. Like,
I'm going to try that later and we'll see what happens.
I'm almost sure that's some sort of pornography phone line.
Almost certainly. Oh, gosh. But like you see people like Domino's, like the command line apps or other things, just try to make it super easy.
Domino's is like, if you're on Facebook and you want to message us pepperoni pizza, we will get you a pepperoni pizza.
You are now obligated to pay us for this pizza, but it will be at your door in 10 minutes.
Right, exactly. It will be there, come hell or high water.
Exactly. All right, well, Starbucks, if you listen to this, maybe try to take our advice and let us play in your wonderful API playground. We all just need some sort of giant sugary beverage right now. It's summertime. It's hot. Some of us now live in Florida and really need something to take the pain away.
Well, that's what Rolling Rock beer is. On sale for $6.99 an 18-pack from Winn-Dixie. Yes, the grocery stores in Florida are called Winn-Dixie.
Oh, and I'm sure you get a kick out of that every time you shop there.
It's a little weird.
So what made you move back for the first time to Florida?
Well, it's very easy. My wife's family is here.
Ah, okay. That is a compelling reason.
Yes, women are very powerful, as the beard knows, or Rikai knows, or someone knows.
How do you like it? It seems like it's brought on a lot of emotions, a lot of change, a lot of reflection for you.
It has made me want to recapture my youth in a way that's probably not healthy. But
probably fun.
Or extremely dangerous. I am trying to now order a custom skateboard for myself to try to take up skating again.
Oh, I support this. That sounds quite entertaining. I hope there'll be pictures on your Twitter feed.
Yes, of me in the hospital, no doubt.
Yeah, something, arm in a sling, so
I'm like
smile.
Roughly 205 pounds right now.
Okay.
When I skateboarded, I was about 145.
Huh.
And I had, like muscles. And I don't know, Wes, do you remember being young?
I sure do.
Like, I have vague memories of it, like agility and like the ability to like fall and roll out of it.
It didn't hurt when you stood up and tried to walk around.
Exactly. I could like pop up in a flip and all that
Things
kind of
were
stuff.
fun. You had hope.
Right. Like, you look at old people like, wow, what's wrong with them? And now I'm like, oh, I got to get up. But I'm going to try. And do you know why I'm going to try?
I don't.
Because this is Florida. And much like Avril Lavigne, I'm never growing up.
So it's Never Neverland.
It is literally Michael Jackson's Neverland. I might want to take that back.
But it's just it's the same temperature all the time. Nothing changes. It's filled with gators and the elderly and you.
Old people, gators, and snakes are the three hazards.
Yeah, snakes, of course.
Order. Right.
So you can have like a pet snake?
I already made friends with the snake.
See, there you go.
I call him Ralph.
Ralph the snake.
And he was in my yard trying to eat frogs. Because this is Florida and I'm living in a goddamn jungle.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just a large terrarium that you have been
It looks like
into.
lizards and frogs and snakes everywhere. It's like, hi. So, yeah.
Interesting. Has it changed much from your like day-to-day business operations having this with this move?
So a little bit. I tried to work from home for about a week, and that has proven really, really hard. So I am going to go ahead and get an office.
Yeah. Okay. What was hard about it?
Well, I have a 16-month-old.
Yeah. So that would be very difficult then.
Yes, and I have 2 dogs. And to be honest, it's more the kid than the dogs. The kid, babies don't give a crap if you're on a conference call.
No.
They just cry when they're going to cry.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So it's caused a lot of like awkward muting. And like right now I have my hand on the trigger because I'm ready to mute at a moment's notice.
Well trained. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was great, but terrible at the same time. I mean, when he's older, it might make sense, but with my luck, they'll end up being another kid. Yeah.
And so it just has ended up that you really need to have like a separation of concerns and be like, this is my business time space.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay. Well, speaking of that kind of stuff, our next item today is someone over in the Coder Radio subreddit who's looking for some career advice. So they write, this is Breaking Point Zero. I know Chris and Mike have a lot of varied industry experience, so I wanted to post here in hopes of getting some advice. I'm a developer currently working on the server side, not the DB connections or anything, the actual server running the application. I'm unhappy and have been very unhappy for a while. Hey, I'm sorry to hear that. Partially just burned out and partially just tired of working for a large corporation that I work for. I recently realized I enjoy talking to people about tech and the possibilities of it. Think about like what could be done with bots or mobile or whatever. It really gets my blood pumping and one can hear, the excitement. The other part of that which I enjoy is helping others find a solution to help bring their ideas to life. The problem is I really have no idea how to find a position like that. I've attempted to search for things like tech sales, but that hasn't led very far. So I implore you, oh great ones, what sort of term should I be using to find this mythical position that I'm in search of? As a side note, I am going to networking events, so I'm not just searching online, but that seems to have proven just as difficult. Breaking Point Zero. All right, what do you think about that? I'll have to try to substitute in for Chris's wonderful knowledge, but hey, maybe he'll chime in on the subreddit when he gets back from vacation.
Wait, Chris got a vacation?
I know, right?
Is he getting more ganja from Jamaica?
I think so. I mean, the studio's out now. Everyone's been complaining.
Yeah, it's a big problem. No, so the job you're looking for is if you want to be like the tech guy for the sales team is and correct me if I'm wrong, Wes, but a sales engineer.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is probably where your experience comes more in, but on my side, they basically make sure that the salespeople aren't selling things for a quarter in a pack of juicy fruit, right? To make sure that the job can actually be done at the price that's being sold at.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. And I think, for a lot of organizations, they can be, it really does depend. Of course, in this industry, there's like a lot of variance here. I've also seen stuff for like solutions engineer sometime or solutions partner. I know some companies even have, they'll embed some of their team in with another company that they're working for, and they'll just kind of help be liaisons or help, bridge technological gaps. But a lot of times you can get, you'll find sales engineers who are heavy on the tech side. And I think that's kind of what Breaking Point Zero is looking for, and really getting to be, the bridge to customers or, new customers or current customers, and helping them really leverage your API set, your integration points, understand what your options are, and a little bit less in the first pitch salesman trying to get your money angle, and more in the all right, well, it looks like we can help you. Let's help make sure that we can help you in the best way possible for both of us. Which is, hopefully you'll find something. I think tech sales, that might lead you astray. Sales engineer, solutions engineer, something like that will hopefully find
you job positions that make sense.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you'll have to try to find some of the companies that, would have positions like that. But
well, I mean, every consultancy has some sort of role like that. They may call it something different, but
yeah, and you may have to look at some things that wouldn't necessarily look, they might not on the surface have all the tech that you want, or might not be exactly what you're looking for. But I think there's at least some flexibility in some of these roles where, if you're knowledgeable and can be a really good partner with the engineering side, that can go a long way.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for writing in Breaking Point Zero, and good luck with your career search. It sounds like you're a talented person who wants to work hard and help people. So hopefully you can find something here that will leverage your talents. Okay, so up next today, turns out it's 2017. That still feels weird to me, even though we're halfway through it now. It's July.
It does.
But I guess that means it's time for another State of the Developer Ecosystem.
And it's time for Mike to bitch again about Swift, which is most important.
I'm looking forward to this. With no further ado, dive right in.
So go to the link in the show notes, jetbrains.com/research-dev-ecosystem 2017, and you will see the best programming language ever invented, Objective-C, at a disgraceful 1%.
Ooh, that is a little disgraceful.
I don't know how to say this nicely, but if PHP is at 12 and Objective-C is at 1, we are clearly living in the darkest timeline possible.
Yeah, that's rough. Oh, gosh. This is not where I want to be.
Wes, I know you love Clojure.
I do. It's true.
But have you heard the good news of Objective-C?
I actually haven't. I used it a little bit in college, but I haven't really done a ton in it. So please, preach to me, Mr. Dominic.
Everything. It is okay, Objective-C is to Christianity as Smalltalk is to Judaism. It's like the new version.
Okay.
We're going to get a lot of hate mail for this one.
I am sure that is true, but just carry on.
It takes on the best parts of Smalltalk with the best parts of C, which are few and far between.
Yeah.
And gives you a language that is compatible with C, but has the awesome messaging and reference counting of Smalltalk.
That sounds actually really... I've always admired Smalltalk, and I felt like, Smalltalk got... really, people focused so much on the objects and forgot about all the messaging.
Right, exactly. I mean, messaging is... okay, I've read a lot of Java.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Java's great. I love Java. I'm a big fan of Java. But the fact that Java is not like a messaging framework, right? It's not a messaging sort of setup.
No, it's not.
It's a huge pain in the ass because you have to catch every possible goddamn error.
Yeah.
Where in Objective-C, it's no, if you screw up, it's just message not understood, right? Or unrecognized message. Unrecognized selector is actually the error.
In some ways, you kind of get a looser coupling for free just right there.
Right. You get a looser coupling. Objective-C is like programming with the assumption that you actually know what you're doing.
Ooh, I like the way that sounds.
Swift. Oh, we're not going to go here. All right. Swift is like programming on the assumption that you're actually stupid.
Ouch.
You don't know better. You're afraid to couple your objects. You're afraid of inheritance. I'm sorry. This is getting mean. I don't mean to say that Swift developers are bad people. But Swift developers are bad people.
So wasn't there a time where you were somewhat excited about Swift?
Yeah, that's what we call marketing.
Before you actually got the real skinny.
So here's the thing. Swift is not a terrible language, right? I mean, it's not PHP.
Yeah.
But I still don't understand why Swift exists at all. Like, I have written plenty of Swift now, and I don't get it. I'm no more efficient in Swift than I was in Objective-C. I get that there are some errors that the language does not allow you to commit.
Right.
But really, don't you have people testing your stuff? Or are you just like deploying builds blindly?
Yeah. No, I sympathize with that argument. Obviously, more certainty is nice, and if you can get it, but that doesn't mean that it's a real value proposition for someone who's already very comfortable and competent in Objective-C. What would you say to someone like learning wanted to target iOS right now?
Honestly?
Yeah.
I would say learn C# and use Xamarin.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think Microsoft has more concern for the practicalities of being a developer than Apple does. And I mean this not in like a Mike hates Apple kind of way, because I know we do a lot of those. It's more... Let me give you a simple example.
Yeah.
Swift is going to be going on version 4 pretty soon. Well, in Objective-C, it's C, right? So if you want to import a C library, like, I don't know, any media processing library you could think of.
Right, there's a whole huge world of C libraries out there.
Well, guess what? It's interop. It's 100% interop, assuming it's not like a Windows one that imports a Windows thing.
Right.
And Swift can do interop with C. I'm not saying it can't. But you can tell that it's getting a little harder with every iteration of Swift. There's a little more formality, a little more ceremony. And I can see a world where at some point it just becomes, the day Apple rewrites UIKit and core location and all those frameworks in Swift rather than Objective-C, because those libraries, believe it or not, particularly Cocoa, is actually a C and C++ library. Those frameworks are not Objective-C. They're C and C++.
Right.
So that's why Objective-C and Swift have that backwards compatibility.
That makes a lot of sense.
The day Apple actually releases those in Swift, if you're using like whatever FFmpeg or whatever you're using that's an old C library, you are in a lot of trouble. And now you have a language that, give IBM credit, and I never do, but give them credit. They're trying to make it a server-side language. And I'm actually I was one of the first financial backers of the Vapor project, vapor.codes, for Swift on the server. Well, they're not going anywhere. And they're not going anywhere for a really simple economic reason. It costs maybe $25 to $30 an hour to hire a Ruby developer or a PHP developer.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And it costs about $50 to $60 an hour to hire a Swift developer.
So that's why you're saying we should all learn Swift right now.
No, that's why I'm saying businesses are not writing their backends in Swift.
Yeah. Right. I mean, especially if you're saying, if you're not seeing the kind of productivity wins or simplicity wins or any of that are advertised.
Swift is, Swift is kind of forcing you to. If you want to be a good Swift developer, you have to learn protocol-oriented programming, which is not a bad thing by any. Yeah, that's vapor.codes you brought on the screen there.
Yeah.
And I think that I've used it. I think it's great, but it is. And again, I was one of the original financial backers, but it is not going the right way because Apple has not. In a weird way, they've pushed Swift, but they've almost overemphasized the replacement of Objective-C rather than saying that these are sister languages and that Swift is another general purpose programming language.
I see what you mean there.
Not that I'm bitter because I was working in Objective-C for a decade.
Right. Yeah, certainly not. You would never be.
And next Java. No, I'm kidding.
So have you seen any I know there's been talk too about like with the besides Vapor, are there any other Swift backend movements?
There's a few good ones. IBM has one. Perfect is, I think, the next most interesting one. I think Vapor is a little more sound, the way it's structured. It's more to my taste. But Perfect, I think it's perfect.io is the probably the second most interesting one if I had to pick. but they're not getting the traction, right? People aren't using them in numbers that matter compared to like a Ruby on Rails or a Django or a PHP Cake or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. So it's just not seeing that kind of...
Right, it's not seeing the kind of adoption you would hope for.
Yeah, especially like they made such a big deal about doing it open source and in the open, which I mean is great. I want to encourage that. I think it's a good thing for them to be exploring. But I do sympathize. Like I also, while not doing a ton of mobile development or anything, I also was like, well, what does this really get me? How does this actually stand out? And why would I want to choose this over something I'm already familiar with, or has more industry support, or has like, okay, I can see it for like I'm making an app where I'm just calling Apple stuff, but like you're talking about, now we suddenly need I need a bunch of libraries of Swift compatible APIs and libraries that I can pull in, and that's where like 90% of my functionality is going to come from.
Right. Well, yeah, that's exactly right. But it's also, if you've been doing Java on your backend for years, right, or Ruby or something like that, Apple, if you really want to be a good Swift developer, you have to move to this protocol-oriented programming paradigm, I feel. And, I do a ton of sales. I try to close people. I talk to project managers. No one wants to invest in their team learning a whole new paradigm, right? That's just that may sound great on a white paper that this is somehow better. But in the practicality, the business stakeholders want this done as cheaply and quickly as possible. So having their team learn this new paradigm just isn't going to be a good sell.
Right. I mean, you've talked in the show already about, the difficulties in trying to get people to adopt DevOps, continuous delivery, all sorts of those kind of practices. Right. It's already a hard sell there. And so you're also like, well, turns out you also don't know how to architect software correctly. So you better relearn this too, just to get the same features in your app.
I mean, I have a hell of a time just getting people to adopt Docker. And my argument is this will cost you very little money relative to what your business, would lose if the server went down. And it would automatically redeploy your systems in a container.
Yeah.
And that sale is an incredibly hard sale.
Boy, isn't that funny?
Yeah. So the idea that we're going to do this all. And I actually happen to agree that protocol-oriented programming is in a lot of cases for complex applications, a more ideal way. But the answer to me isn't change your programming language. It's adopt some of these practices in the language you're using.
Yeah, sure. So it's Swift might be useful as an exploration of how to get this sort of ideas right. But
exactly,
you would prefer to see this in as a library that you could start adopting some of these practices within the languages you're already using.
Well, I think there was forgive my 90s love here.
Yeah, sure.
But had Apple re-released WebObjects with the Swift version of it when they released Swift, I think there was a high probability that Swift would have actually been a major back-end web framework in addition to being a mobile application development framework, or rather language. But because they didn't do that, because they left it up to the community, and I'm a hippie now. I've turned sides. I love Vapor. I think Perfect is fine, which is a weird thing to say.
It is, yes.
But because, companies, corporations, especially big ones, buy on the name brand. And telling them that you have this great framework called Vapor just isn't doing it, right? Now, if you said this is the Apple web development framework, that would hold a ton of water.
That means something to non-technical users, to people who have to allocate budgets for this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Interesting. Well, did you have any other takeaways from this State of the Ecosystem article?
So 2 other small things, or 3 rather. The first one I think is pretty obvious. JavaScript is the most popular programming language, period. I mean, Wes, do you have anything on that? I know you close your script. Do you have anything you want to say on that? Or?
Oh, sure. Well, I would just say, yeah, looking at this chart here, you see things like JavaScript and Java still,
rule the world. Yeah.
Rule the world. Yeah, they're just the heavy dominators. And I think a lot of that is, there's a lot of inertia. There's a lot of libraries. There's been a lot of man hours put into both of those projects to get them, for all the hate that JavaScript's got, they've put in a ton of work in V8. It's a really nice runtime now, and there's it's actually modernizing, which is nice to see. From the Clojure perspective, I think it just highlights kind of why I like Clojure. Not everyone will or be interested in it, but they've always had a very pragmatic approach in that, like, we don't want to build our own garbage collector. We don't want to have to reinvent all of these libraries. And so while it's like, you can see here on this chart, like, it's not popular at all. It's down there with Kotlin and Elixir and Haskell. CoffeeScript is now, I think, a lot farther down than you would have seen like 5 years ago. But they
Which makes a ton of sense.
It does. Yeah. But when you use, ClojureScript or Clojure, you get really good host interop, and you can use any of those native libraries. Actually, there was recently just some pretty exciting ClojureScript compiler developments where now you can pretty much it's like native interop with Node libraries and all 3 of the common JavaScript packaging formats. So ClojureScript came with like a namespace and package stuff first class when JavaScript was still trying to invent that. Now there's like CommonJS and AMD, all these things. You can just have the ClojureScript compile. It will go get your NPM deps for you. It will use them, bundle them all up, figure out your externs for you, optimize it all with Google Clojure, and just spit out optimized JavaScript. So it's pretty exciting, and it even includes support now so that in the same build tool chain, you can compile JSX, and you can support things like React Native. So it should make the interop story even better.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, the thing that I found most interesting was I'm an old Java boy. I'm happy to see Java at the top, though I think things like Kotlin and Scala, particularly Java 9, I don't know how closely you follow that, Wes, but Java 9 is starting to adopt some of the more functional paradigms.
Yeah.
That particularly you probably are, old hat for human Clojure, right? But I think that's going to be interesting. What I found really surprising, though, is that of the people surveyed by JetBrains, Google's Go was the most promising programming language.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that. I know the audience on Coder Radio loves Rust over Go. So this is kind of an interesting situation where a lot of folks have a lot of positive feedback for Go, and Rust didn't even make the list. Like, it didn't even rank.
I wonder
Objective-C ranked higher, sorry.
No. I wonder if that's like a weird split in... I feel like I've seen a lot of Rust love from sysadmin types or free software types or people who are, involved in some of the more traditional Linux community. And Go seems very focused on web dev, networking, containers especially, and any kind of these like modern things that end up coming out of like big cloud-focused shops. And I think there's somewhat of a disconnect between those two groups sometimes.
I actually think that's fair. I mean, I'm more on the cloud-focused shop side, and I'm pretty I flirted with Go several times, but Rust has never been able to attract me. So I think that's actually a really good diagnosis.
And I think part of it's like Rust lets you do a lot of neat stuff, and I think it's an interesting language. I've enjoyed watching its development, but I'm not writing a new, I'm not writing something like Mozilla Servo or really low-level stuff where I'm interested in managing my own memory. Go seems to have a very compelling story of like, hey, look, we support a lot of your networking primitives right out of the box. We have a good story on, concurrency and parallelism. Have fun. You probably won't shoot yourself in the foot.
It's like C++, right? It's like C++ had it been written in 2014 instead of, 1970. Whatever.
Exactly. And I think there's also a lot of enterprise love for how simple it is and how, like the lack of generics and things like that maybe constrain some of those, unicorn programmers that will write very complicated things that might work very well, but are hard for enterprises that need to have kind of like lowest common denominator code that new members on the team can pick up and work on from day one.
And that's what C# is for, kids.
Hey, there you go.
There you go. And somebody's mentioning in the chat Kotlin. So I don't know if we mentioned this at the top, Wes, but JetBrains, the inventors of Kotlin, is actually the folks who published the survey.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think it's a little unfair to start beating up on Kotlin not ranking higher, only because Kotlin just got adopted for Android. And we should probably say this. Apple made it pretty clear that Swift was not only a new language for iOS development, but Objective-C was going to be taken into the backyard and shot in the back of the head.
Yes.
Google was more like, yeah, you can use Kotlin now, but yay, Java, right? So there's a big difference here. I think it's a little unfair to compare the Swift adoption over Objective-C to the Kotlin adoption over Java, which is a damn shame because Objective-C is still the best language in that entire list.
What do you think of Kotlin?
I like Kotlin. I mean, Kotlin is very similar to Swift. We had a whole show on this where, of course, it's obviously like compiling to the JVM and not native, where Swift is compiling native, blah, blah, blah. But it's, okay. Part of my problem with Swift is that iOS applications can get complicated. But if you've ever worked on a JVM enterprise app, there are very few things more complex and over-engineered than that. So the things that you get from like Kotlin and Swift and protocol-oriented programming, I feel make a lot more sense in that domain than they do on like your mobile app. So it's weird, right? Because in a lot of ways, Kotlin and Swift are, from a syntax and a development philosophy perspective, are actually very comparable. Like they have a lot of similar ideas. But because they operate in different domains, and I'm going to remind the audience before they start writing their YouTube comments, that Kotlin has been around for several years now on the server before Google adopted it for Android.
Yeah, definitely.
So that sort of architecture and sort of, I would say, complex engineering, to me, makes a lot of sense on the server side, where, I find on the mobile side, a little bit of like tight coupling kind of makes sense because, if you're writing your mobile application, in a lot of cases, your mobile app is actually just a dumb front end to your backend API. Maybe you're writing the Starbucks app, and I think we've all learned from the original article of the show notes today, the Starbucks mobile app is just a dumb front end to that API that opened that Starbucks API. So you don't need to worry about engineering, I think, quite as heavily.
Yeah, no, I think that's I think that's definitely true. And in many ways, like we've spent a long time working with kind of object-oriented, MVC style ways of doing UI work, interface work, and we have a lot of libraries optimized for that. And outside some of the more modern, like diffing-based systems, things like React and Vue, I think it's been kind of hard, like for there to be a really good functional story around UI work. And so unless you're going to go full React, it may be more work to try to adopt some of these practices, some of these ways of developing software, just to try to make your dumb UI when, that makes more sense to put that labor in the back end where you actually do have a lot of incidental complexity that you need to manage and is actually doing most of the heavy lifting for your app. It's interesting here too, like there's Scala. I kind of expected to see more Scala here in this list than we did, but I suppose that's maybe just in the enterprise world and some of my bias there. I'm also kind of surprised that they talk a little bit here about, they have some neat graphics about how often do you use the following tools. And so like some things are common that you'd expect, things like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. Yeah, people use that. Less so of an issue tracker, less so of code review. That one I can kind of see. But I'm kind of surprised by how this continuous integration, it's a little bit weighted on the no, I don't use side, but I would have thought these days that would have picked up more.
Yeah, I'm a little, so I did a look at that, and I was wondering if people don't consider things like Jira an issue tracker.
Right.
I wonder if they consider that more a project management tool.
Yeah, that is, I think, how it's used primarily.
But it is at its core, right, an issue tracker. I mean, you have tickets, they go, it's agile, Kanban board style. But that's interesting. I mean, if people really aren't using any sort of issue tracker, that's, I wasn't surprised to see that only 55% of people actually write tests. Because, everybody talks about tests when they want to screw over another vendor and steal a contract. Yes. But nobody writes them on a fixed bid, right? It just doesn't happen unless you're on an agile contract.
You're like, well, I was going to start writing the test, but I just finished the feature in time. So there you go. It's done.
And it would have been below cost, right? So the issue tracker thing was a little weird to me because I'm thinking, well, then how the hell do you know what you're working on? So I find that surprising, and this is where I think the JetBrains survey sort of fails. It doesn't define what an issue tracker is. For instance, if folks are using Trello, well, I would consider that to be an issue tracker.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I doubt JetBrains would, considering they sell an issue tracker called UTrack.
I did not know that.
Yes, they do. They probably don't consider anything that's not like a specific issue tracker, an issue tracker, or even like something like Asana where it's just a task list or a task list in Basecamp. I would consider those all a form of issue tracking.
Yeah, I would as well. Like, not all organizations are going to have a super formal process or a specific tool for it.
Right, or even like an Excel sheet, right? Like I bet a lot.
Oh yeah, totally. All right, go pull up the Excel sheet and start working on this issue and whatever. Boy, that's funny. All right, well, now that we're depressed or pleased, I'm not quite sure about the state of the developer ecosystem. Let's talk about how our first sponsor tonight maybe can help inspire you that yes, you can make things better, and that's our friends over at Scale Your Code. Head on over to scaleyourcode.com. There you can sign up for their real, it's a low flow mailing list, but they have incredible content. Really, whatever your role is, whether you're trying to start your own startup, you're working on a new business, or you're trying to help build an existing company, they've got awesome lessons from industry insiders on how to scale your code, build reliable distributed systems, and take your engineering skills to the next level. So often in this industry, you're confronted with colleagues or others who, think they know best. Everyone has their own anecdotes about how to do things, how to run, in production systems without downtime and do it properly. But you don't always have access to some of the people that, have actually set the agenda for this in the industry. Scale Your Code brings that right to your inbox. They won't spam you. They don't sell your information, nothing like that. Plus, go in there, sign it up, helps let them know that you support the Coder Radio program, which is awesome. You will see so much incredible content from people that you've already heard of. People like Nick Craver. One thing I found that was fascinating that I've enjoyed for a long time with this site, they've got Seth Vargo over at HashiCorp. So I'm sure you've heard about HashiCorp. They make awesome tools, things like Vagrant, Terraform, Consul, Packer. They're some of the at the forefront of, how we think about cloud things, how we think about deploying, packaging, distributing our applications. They've got awesome interviews with people like this, give you insight into how they think, the projects they're working on, and how you can take that and use it in, the software that you're building at home. So they've got a ton of great stuff, tutorials, interviews, best practices, stuff new all the time. You won't get spammed. Go to scaleyourcode.com, sign up today, and learn from some of the industry's experts on how to scale your code. Thank you to Scale Your Code for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. All right. What do we got next for the fine audience today, Mr. Dominic?
Google Analytics is used to track users. I can't imagine this is shocking to anybody, but it was submitted to the subreddit. So I feel like we should talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so here's a issue over at Mozilla/addons front end talking just about that. Let's see. Yeah.
So basically, Google Analytics will still track you, even if it says it's not in Firefox, right? Because it's Mozilla. So,
right. Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about this, to be honest with you. On the one hand, I mean, we all know Google's kind of skeevy, right?
Oh, yeah, certainly.
I feel like that's kind of the baseline. So is the fact that they are aggressively tracking you shocking?
No, I mean, it certainly isn't shocking to me, but I could see how, people desperate, perhaps rightly so, to get away from some of the Google ecosystems or just be more conscious of where those hooks are. You start becoming more aware and you're like, why? I'm trying to use my non-Google browser, but here's Google anyway, everywhere. Yeah, this was an interesting, issue discussion here. And Mozilla gets, it sounds like a lot of value. What actually turns out happening is this is the actual add-ons page is like an embedded iframe hosted on Mozilla's site. So when you open that up, you are downloading from them. They use Google Analytics to help get anonymized information about their visitors and optimize their site. They seem to get a lot of value out of that. But I can certainly understand how Firefox people are like, wait, I didn't sign up for this. Don't have my information.
Okay, but I'm going to again say, like, Mozilla, by using Google Analytics, is making a deal with Google that Google is going to track their users. So if Mozilla feels like that's something that shouldn't happen, then they don't get the juicy data that comes with Google Analytics, right? Like, I really don't see the outrage here.
Yeah, I think it was more about... Yeah, I don't know if I would say outrage is justified. I think it's more about expectation issue. Thankfully, it looks like in the discussions here that they are firm, like they're not removing analytics support entirely, but they did seem to support the idea of having an opt-in or respecting do not track or other things to try to limit this, or if you don't want to send that information, find a way to not. So it seems like they're open to pleasing some of their users. Scandal, I don't think I would call it that.
Fair enough. I wouldn't call it a scandal either, but I felt like we had to cover it because people were getting in a tizzy.
Yeah, and I think, I can feel that. Like, there is this, Google is everywhere. It's very hard to avoid. Even if you want to use it and are comfortable using it, there's a lot of privacy implications there that are sometimes hard to understand. And so I can just see it being surprising for people, even when it shouldn't necessarily be. I could also understand where Firefox is coming from and wanting to use, get this information because, hey, that's kind of the bread and butter of what they're doing. In the show notes, there's a Hacker News discussion. I think that one was pretty good as well, kind of shedding some light. Some people from Mozilla posted there and tried to explain their side of the story.
I think that makes sense. But let me tell you another story with two sides there, Wes. FOSS vendors getting the shaft in the healthcare IT department.
Oh, I don't like the sounds of this.
Ooh, it's rock hard. So we got this email from a listener whose name he did not provide at the email, which makes this challenging for me. He says, "My life for the last 3 years." Subject heading, FOSS, healthcare, IT, and liability dragons. Wes, there be dragons.
Oh, no, and not the good kind of dragon.
TLDR, FOSS vendors would make a lot of money hand over fist, but have your $100 million umbrella policy ready for defect liability.
Oh.
So I'm actually going to sum this up because I know we're going over on time. Basically, this listener makes the argument, and from a position of being in the healthcare IT world, of FOSS vendors such as myself that go in and try to sell solutions based on FOSS software, right, to IT, to healthcare IT departments, have a serious problem in that in their contracts they only accept implementation liability, which is true. Like, that is, I'm sure this is the case for you guys too, right? That's what my contract says. For instance, if Rails has a bug, that's not my problem.
Totally.
But if I screw up setting up your server, that is my problem.
Exactly.
So that's an interesting perspective where, because of those contract structures, a lot of healthcare IT departments are actually refusing the FOSS solutions and going with proprietary solutions such as Microsoft, because Microsoft will indemnify them to the liability.
I see. And that just makes sense.
Right, because lawyers rule the goddamn country.
Yes, they do. Boy, that does put FOSS vendors kind of in a tough position. And I've definitely seen some of this before where it's like, yeah, if you're really in the position where you're looking to be able to just offload all of that kind of liability and support issues to to your vendor and not have that liability in-house, it can be tough to support some of these open source things because there is you have to somewhere fundamentally have someone who's willing to sign on the line and say, like, yep, we are liable for this.
Right. Someone has to be able to get sued, basically.
Right. That's the culture that we live in.
Right. I mean, and I see this from two sides. One, these guys are paying a lot for proprietary solutions that, in my opinion, don't make sense. But also, a $20 million lawsuit would absolutely bankrupt my company.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, no doubt about it. That's bankruptcy overnight. So I get it, right?
And this is one of those fields where there's a lot of regulation and there's a lot of rules, partially for good reasons, perhaps not also, but there's a lot of hoops, there's a lot of liability, and at the end of the day, it's not like marketing data or anything like that. It's people's lives and their health. So I can understand why there's a lot of caution and or just fear of getting sued because we have a ton of medical lawsuits in this country.
Let me default advocate for you a little bit here.
Oh yeah, please do.
Let's just as an example, and this is not me beating up on Microsoft, because actually ASP Core is now open source.
Yes,
but let's just say ASP is a proprietary one. Let's just rewind to 2 years ago when it was proprietary. That could be totally faulty, right? There could be bugs in that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're programmers like anybody else.
Exactly. Not writing their tests, as we talked about before.
Almost certainly. So is the rationale here, because the way I read this fellow's email is that the rationale here is, as long as we can lay off the legal liability on someone else, then that is the answer to the problem. Is that really what we've come to? Not technical, not technical viability, not efficiency of data processing, but legal liability. Is that really, Wes, where we are right now?
I don't want to think that, and I don't think it's universal. I've certainly talked to people, including even Noah of the JB Network, who's talked about deploying Open EMR and other similar solutions. So there clearly are ways for people to do it. There are companies or enterprises or healthcare providers who are open to, what I guess is now a non-traditional model for some reason. But boy, I can just lawyers really do run a lot of things, and unless you have a company where some of the business side of the house has come from a tech background, it's hard to make those arguments for, especially when you're like, well, I just went out to get drinks with the sales rep from so-and-so giant company, and yeah, it's expensive, but they've got 24/7 support, and they're liable, and they're willing to sign all of our contracts and NDAs and everything, and he's a really nice guy, and everyone else uses them.
Right, and we can sue them into the goddamn ground. Actually, no, we can sue them and they have the money to pay.
And they have the money to pay us. Yeah, exactly. Which is like, none of those are things I would ever want to have to be like, yes, this is what I'll do because of that. But I can see people, it's a lot of pressure.
So I used to write Java applets for a living.
Shame on you.
Which were totally guaranteed by Sun at the time.
Yeah, okay. There we go.
I just want to say, but they were probably the most insecure, reckless, disrespectful of user privacy thing you could possibly be doing. So that guarantee was in effect meaningless unless you have the legal muscle to sue them, right?
Yeah, totally.
I just want that's just the reality of the situation. We can move on from this. I don't want to beat up on the proprietary solutions. I mean, there are, ASP Core is actually really interesting, right? The whole .NET Renaissance thing is cool, but it seems a crazy way to buy software solutions.
Yeah, it does kind of seem like a crazy way to buy software solutions. I completely agree with you. What a world that we live in, right? Well, I guess if you're in the position where you're like, this is stupid, I'm not going to do that, open source all the way, just talk to our final sponsor this evening, our friends over at DigitalOcean.com. If you head on over to DigitalOcean.com, you will find cloud computing designed for developers, entrepreneurs, engineers, and pretty much anyone who wants to get stuff done. That's because you can launch a brand new VPS in just 55 seconds. Yeah, what? Am I serious? I totally am. 55 seconds, sometimes less if you look at some screenshots on the interwebs. And it can be whatever you want. FreeBSD. Yeah, they've got that. Pretty much any kind of Linux that you're talking about. Container OS. Yeah, they got that too. Right from the CoreOS project, they work closely with these upstreams, and you can see that they're totally focused on developers, on open source, and getting things done because they take community contributions, they hire real editors to make sure that you've got first-in-class content. And that way, you know that how to do it right, you know how to get started, whether it's deploying Open EMR, a new WordPress server, a VPN connection for your small office, doesn't matter. DO helps you get it done. Plus, when you use our promo code CODERDIGITAL, yeah, that's right, CODERDIGITAL, you'll get a $10 credit. When you go over and check out the pricing page, you'll see that that's an awesome deal because prices start at just $5 a month. That gets you a whole virtual CPU, 512 MB of memory, 20 gigs pure SSD disk, and a whopping terabyte of transfer. And this is not some sort of paltry transfer where you're like, it's super slow, it's 100 megs down, who knows up. No, they have got 40 gigabit E coming into these hypervisors. They've got great peering, great transit. Super simple, makes it easy and reliable. Plus, with new premium features, things like load balancing, monitoring, attachable block storage, they've got object storage in the works. All of those make them super competitive with some of their behemoth competitors. They've got the same primitives, but super simple, super clean API, which is perfect because that's what we all want, right? Like you want programmatic access, you want it to be simple, you don't want it to be super complicated that spits giant JSON blobs that you just don't know what to do with. No, they built their own apps on it, they built their UI on it, they dog food this stuff. DigitalOcean knows what they're doing and it really shows. And that's what makes it so simple and so great to use. You can get started with promo code, Coder Digital, that lets them know you appreciate them sponsoring this here program. Thank you very much to DigitalOcean. And when you create your favorite new app, cool project, or whatever, write in and tell us about it. We'd love to hear. Okay, so up next, we've got SameRoom.io. I think we've all had the problem of too many chat apps. There's just so many. We've already talked about like several just on the program today. What are you supposed to do with that? How do you do it? I have like 3 officially supported chat apps at work already. Well, I'm sure you have the same problem.
I just don't talk to people at work.
Does that work? Because I would totally be down to try it.
It depends. If you're the guy who owns the company, it works.
Damn it. Yeah, that does seem like that would work pretty well.
Yeah, have you ever seen... No, you know what? Never mind. It's good. Yeah, so this is pretty interesting. It integrates all your chat apps into one app, which kind of feels like nirvana to me. Like, you know, I have, let's see, 5 Slack teams open right now. I'd like to make that 0 if possible, or 1. Can we just take this a step further?
I would love that.
Right, like...
So you're saying we're all going right back to IRC? That's the solution?
You know what? I feel like IRC would keep all the designers and PMs out.
Yes, it would.
I'm actually okay with that.
Right?
You know
This is our nerd talk zone. Techies only.
Listen, if you can't run it in Bash, I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like that's the end of it.
That's the end of it. So would you use something like SameRoom.io?
Oh, absolutely. I would. You know what? I tolerate Slack being open because I have to, but you can ask anybody who's ever worked with me. I get really grumpy when someone asks me to have another chat client open.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like I'm getting hit from multiple sides, and it's like, all right, dude, I'm talking to these guys on Slack, these guys on Google, these guys on Skype. Enough is enough. Like, so I have to actually get work done.
So here they've got them some sort of like fun things like, I'm Jacob, and I write software. I use SameRoom to read Freenode IRC channels in Slack. So what's your pitch? I'm Michael.
I'm Michael. Please stop messaging me.
That's perfect. Yeah, exactly. And no, I will never install your stupid chat platform.
No, but I think SameRoom could be cool. I mean, right now I have managed to be enough of a jerk that I'm only in Slack. But that took like 9 years of being a douchebag.
Yeah. You had to build that and make people understand that it was like too much trouble to even try to argue with you about it.
Yeah, and let's be honest, like I definitely lost plenty of staff all gigs because of this. Because I'm like, no, I'm just not going to sit in Skype all day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because at some point, you know, this is my thing, right? I feel like distributed teams can really work well in Slack. But they're missing the glue. There needs to be some sort of bot or software or bot that binds everything together. And the solution to that problem is not to then add different chat services, right? It's not to add Basecamp or you know, Skype or HipChat or anything. It's to say, you know what, every message is not important. I mean, this is almost like email. I don't know if you're using Gmail, Wes, but are you using the public version of Gmail right now?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So, you know, it says important promotions updates.
Yes.
I read all the email I get, even from listeners, even if like sometimes I don't respond because they're calling me an asshole, which fair enough.
You can't respond to everything.
But Gmail has gotten really good at like all the woofu stuff we get goes into updates.
Nice.
All the advertising crap goes into promotions, and anything that's like, you know, grandmother who just got an iPad who's very excited to send
that's adorable.
An e-letter with a formal subject line, and a formal address, and a formal signature.
That's adorable.
That goes right into primary, right?
Yeah.
Like that goes, and I read that first, right? It goes primary, updates, and I never open the promotions. So.
Totally. It is really nice in that respect. I agree.
But if SameRoom can do that for us, if SameRoom can say, you know what, this just isn't that important, right? Like, and if any solution, any kind of AI bot can do that, can you tell I have something coming out in a week and a half?
I think so. Yeah.
Like it's like I'm advertising something. That would be extremely productive. And I think as developers who tend to bill out at pretty high rates, it would be good for our employers and clients as well, that we not be bothered with, John's latest weekend golf trip, right? Immediately.
Yes.
And not disrupt our flow.
No, because that's super important. You need to, when you're in the zone, you're actually being productive. You don't need 1,000 pings that aren't time sensitive. They just get in your way with nothingness.
Right. Exactly.
Interesting. Well, do you want to talk a little bit more about the things that you just mentioned there?
So, can I tease?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Please do.
So I am launching something on August 1st.
That's coming up real quick.
Can you tell I'm nervous?
Oh, no, you sound confident and ready.
It's Florida. The fact that I can still see 40 feet in front of me is amazing down here. I mean, I am like God. I can drive. I tend not to crash my car. And I don't get a senior citizen discount.
Ooh.
I am like Achilles down here.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm Ajax, Achilles, whatever. So I just want to point people to a Twitter account. And I'm not going to say too much more about it because you know what? I don't want to ruin the fun. I have a lot coming on, and there's going to be free stuff, free 3D printed stuff.
No way.
That we're going to mail to listeners. So I don't want to ruin it. But if you go to Twitter at @TheMadBotter Inc. and you follow and send a message at @TheMadBotter Inc. with the hashtag Coder Radio. Let's just say that would put you on a list, almost like a bot did it, almost automatically. And then you would, in future weeks, get a message, a direct message, asking you for your shipping address for a 3D printed goodie.
Ooh, who doesn't love goodies?
Who doesn't love goodies?
And 3D printing, I mean, that's just all the rage.
It is all the rage, and I love my 3D printer, my Lulzbot Mini, right next to me from Denver, Colorado.
Ooh, how long have you had that?
Since maybe 3 months now.
Ah, so it's a fast love, but sincere.
It is a hot sort of summer love.
Steamy affair.
Steaming.
Yes. Well, I mean, you're in Florida now, so there's just sort of vapor in the air.
That's
walking
actually
through a pool.
Yeah, that's Ben Gay, but whatever.
Oh god. Ooh.
That got weird.
I need a drink.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, that's it. Amen.
So Wes, what are you up to? I know we have to close the show in a few
minutes.
That's
true.
What have you been doing? We've been talking about me and Java. Both are very sad.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't. Java's had some like you were talking about. Java's had some exciting improvements in the work. Did they actually decide they were going to go with a module system for Java 9?
Yes, but there's some conversation still going on the mailing list. But yes, I mean, absolutely. But the details are still being kind of
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, I've been playing a lot with Clojure on the side, but at work I've been doing a lot of Chef. And so that means I've been doing a lot of Ruby, which has not previously been my background. So it's been interesting. I've been a Python guy before, so that's kind of where I was coming in. So obviously it's not that much different, but there's Ruby-isms and such.
So what are you finding Ruby to be like?
It's funny because I'm also playing a little bit with Elixir on the side as well, which has a very Ruby-inspired syntax, but under the hood is also heavily Clojure-inspired, as well as, of course, Erlang. For whatever reason, there's a lot about Ruby that I really like. Like, there's a lot of functionally sympathetic things, blocks, etc. that I like. I like the expression-oriented style, which is something I don't really like. I don't like all the statements in Python. So there's a lot about it that I like, but there's something about the syntax that just kind of rubs me the wrong way. And I feel bad saying that because I have nothing against the language at all. It's a fine language. It works well. I'm enjoying using it for the most part, but it's just, and maybe that just comes with time, but I just don't have an aesthetic appreciation for it. Even though I know that's one thing that people rave about Ruby is they love how friendly and easy it is.
Yeah, so I'm going to say I've been doing Ruby for a long time. Ruby is a language that is actually really seductive, I feel like, when you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
But as you branch out and start doing other things, like I've been playing a lot. Like I've been doing a little bit of like all kinds of stuff. I did Rust. I did a little experiment with some Arduino and Go, which I really liked. And every time I have to come back to Ruby for work, I find Ruby to be a little parochial, for lack of a better word. Like a little bit of the Fisher Price of languages, right? It's like, okay, it almost assumes you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. I think that you've hit it exactly what I would, coming from me, especially like as someone who, it's not my first language. I already understand a lot of the concepts that it has. And so like one thing, RSpec has taken me forever to really get comfortable with or like, and I'm really used to a lot more, I guess you'd say less expressive, but like in some ways simpler tests where it's just like using regular constructs. And so having these tests that are meant to be very human readable, which I can appreciate. And I feel like maybe for a beginner would make it super easy to get started. But for me, it's like, there's just so much magic here and it takes me forever to start peeling that back. And then I'm like, okay, well now I understand it, but I don't need the magic. I could have just written the simpler one.
So I can speak to RSpec in particular. RSpec is the product of kind of a failed dream. I remember when RSpec became popular, let's say back in like 2012-ish, it was the idea behind RSpec was that guys like you and me would not be writing these tests.
Okay.
That we would have project managers or product owners writing the tests, people who weren't that technical, but like knew how to write an Excel macro. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
And that is why it is the way it is. But that never happened because in a way, it's just simple enough and just expressive enough to be annoying to full-blown developers, I feel. Exactly. But just hard enough and technical enough to be impossible for the PM to write.
So it's kind of like the dreams of having the designers make the templates.
Well, if you've ever listened to Bruce Springsteen's Atlantic City, it's a lot like that song. It's like the land of broken dreams and desperation.
Okay, well that totally makes sense, and I'm glad that it's not just me that feels that way.
No, it's not you. In fact, one of my big regrets is that I went with Ruby and not Python. And I like Ruby, I like Rails, in that I don't use the default configuration of Rails, and I think CoffeeScript is a crime against humanity.
Yeah. Certainly now, anyway.
It never made sense. I don't want to go into this.
We've had we'll save that for another. Yeah, exactly.
Well, bitching them out right when they came out, but like Python is pretty powerful, and I would actually argue, and this is going to be for web applications. I still argue that Ruby is a great choice.
Yeah,
and I even argue that Ruby is actually a slightly better choice than Python. Because Rails is like super good at that, and you get a lot of efficiencies. Yeah,
well, and it's very like all the magic means that there's not a lot of boilerplate. You just kind of go when you have a web server now.
Right, magic means cheap. Right,
yes.
Magic means efficiency. But Python has proven so powerful with data processing that if you're in the sciences or you're in like statistics or analytics and research, and you want a high level language, I think you're kind of crazy not to at least consider Python. Now you may decide to go with something else, right? You may decide to go with Rust or Go or whatever.
Julia, who knows?
Who the hell, right? Or I mean, I hear a lot about Elm. Mm-hmm. I don't get it, but I hear it. But like I see Ruby as kind of a one-trick pony. It is a web application development framework. Granted, that's what like 99% of people are trying to do.
True.
But if you are like writing scripts, like I have a bunch of Ruby scripts and I'm looking at them saying, I should probably just like write these in C or Python.
Totally. Yes. I have some of those too, where it's like, I've even seen stuff where like they're cookbooks that were turned into scripts. And it's just like, this is too complicated when it could just be like a 50-line Python file that I could come back to and read the first time in like 10 minutes.
Right. And I think that goes to that Ruby sort of wasn't super popular until Rails came around.
Yes, right. That was like the killer app for the whole language.
Yeah. And then Rails sort of infected the Ruby development community. I mean, this is my theory. I have nothing to back this up. So send your hate mail to alan@jupiterbroadcasting.com.
Oh, that's perfect.
Doesn't even host TechSnap anymore, but I'm still sending him hate mail.
Oh, I like that. Well, hopefully I won't get any complaints about that. But if I do, I know where to send them. I think that's, what is it? It's Michael at Buccaneer something?
Or Michael at themadbotter.com. Whoops.
Ooh, quiet.
Hashtag leaks.
Quiet
Hashtag
down now. All right. Well, I guess that's a natural place to end the show. I would like to say next time, if we do this again, we should definitely talk about Elm because there's certainly not time today, but that's an interesting topic.
Yeah, another day.
Anything you would like to leave people with? Any more teases or just, hey, go check out the Twitter?
All I would say is go check the Madbotter Inc. on Twitter if you want free 3D printed stuff.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Thank you very much for letting me jump in here today while Chris got some much needed rest. This has been episode...
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, oh, my pleasure. It's always a ton of fun to talk about the craziness of software with the delightful Mr. Michael Tomanic. If you'd like to see more of the show, head on over to jupiterbroadcasting.com. There you can get all the archives. You can find the calendar, see when they're live next, or just join the live stream and chat in the IRC. It's a ton of fun. This has been episode 266, broadcast live on July 20th, 2017.